about Hawaii? I can't imagine this is true, but you say it is. It's got to be true. Hawaii had schools 15 years before California.
You know, we have a lot to be proud of in Hawaii that we largely don't know. For instance, we had electricity 4 years before the White House, but one of the things I found out is that we had schools 15 years before California. The oldest school in California is 1846 in the Santa Clara area near Stanford. But in Hawaii, Lahaina Luna on Maui is 1831.
Wow.
On Oahu, the Oahu Charity School, which I have pictured here, 1832. And this school is still in existence. It was initially where the statue of Kamehameha is, and I want to tell you a story about that as we get to it. But it was originally where Ali'iolani Hale is today, and then it moved to where the original main library is, and then it is now in the Kahala area. But it goes back to 1832, so it's over almost 170 years old.
So before that, people were teaching in their homes, or how were the kids learning?
The first schools in Hawaii were by missionaries for adults because they created a Hawaiian language that was written, and in Hawaii, people wanted to become literate, and tens of thousands of Hawaiians took these courses. Then they decided to create schools for kids. And these are the permanent schools we have today. Lahaina Luna is still around. The third school is Royal School. It gave School Street its name, 1839, and it was originally for the children of Ali'i.
Wow.
But there's another interesting story I found about Hawaii schools that I want to tell your viewers about, and that is McKinley High School. The students at McKinley High School during World War II raised enough money selling war bonds to buy a bomber for the military.
Wow.
And
those students in World War II in McKinley were just so amazing.
Well, imagine if the students at a high school could do that with a sufficient motivation. Imagine what they could do today.
Right.
But they raised $360,000, the equivalent of $4.5 million, and they bought a B-24 Liberator bomber that they gave to the military. They painted on the side of it a volcano with Madame Pelly coming out of it.
Wow.
It was nicknamed Madame Pelly, and it served in the Pacific during World War II.
Those were some very patriotic students, because I know we have a writer that writes for us doing stories about women in World War II, and quite often McKinley is mentioned as having some very heroic and amazing patriotic students.
Yes, well, they certainly did.
McKinley.
And McKinley's goes back to 1865. It's the oldest public school in the state. And if you wanted to go to a high school and you lived in the Leeward area, up until when they built Farrington in 1936, you had to go to McKinley High School.
Well, and it's stood there all this time, and it's still pretty amazing school.
It is. Well, it's actually had 5 different locations and 3 different names.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
And
But it was McKinley during the war. Right?
It was McKinley during the 40s when it was built, but it started off as the Fort Street English Day School, was later Honolulu High School, and that's where Central Middle School is today.
Honolulu High School would be a good Name for this Hawaii 5-0 school.
That's right.
Instead of Kukui.
Kukui High School.
Kukui High School. Okay, so why is Hawaii stamped on the U.S. dollar during World War II?
It's a very interesting story. A lot of people have seen these dollars that have Hawaii in small letters on the front. There's a brown seal instead of a green seal that we typically have on our money. But on the back, in big outline letters, it said Hawaii. And they did that because they were afraid that the Japanese, if they wanted to, could actually take over Hawaii. That we weren't sufficiently defended, and that if they did so, they would get $200 or $300 million of our currency, which was at the time $5, $6, $7 billion, and then use it to fight the war against us. And so they decided if they printed it differently, if it had Hawaii stamped on it, should an event like that happen, they could demonetize it. And the Japanese, should they take over, not be able to use it to fight against us.
Wow. So are those bills still around?
Yeah, you can find them on eBay for about 20 bucks for a dollar bill, depending on the condition. There was some woman who had kept several hundred $20 bills, and they're worth tens of thousands of dollars today in total.
Wow. Well, okay, what about Jack Lord? We were just talking about Hawaii 5-0. It says 2 years after Jack Lord died, what happened?
Well, a guy wanted to buy his car, a big fan of the show, contacted Marie, made a deal to buy the car.
And Marie was his wife?
Marie Lord was his wife, and he needed to have the car cleaned up, so he took it to Bill Greenick of Hollish-Shell, who told me the story, and he said he got it in running condition, he cleaned it up a little bit, they took it to the mainland where it was fully detailed and worked on, and they found a wedding ring in the track of the seat.
Wow.
And the guy technically now owned the wedding ring since he had owned the car for a year. But he very graciously had breakfast with her and gave her back her wedding ring.
Aww.
She had no idea what had happened to it. She had lost it about 10 years earlier.
Oh, it's probably her fingers were too small and she put her hand down and it fell right off, right?
Possible.
A lot of women have that experience. Well, that's great. What about, okay, you were talking about the statue of Kamehameha before, so what about that? What's in your book about that?
Well, you know, the statue of Kamehameha was cast in Paris, and it was put on a ship to Hawaii, and the ship was wrecked off the coast of South America near the Falkland Islands. And fortunately, they had insured it, and they sent back to the sculptor, and they said, please make another, and he did. And they sent it on its way to Hawaii. Well, meanwhile, the man in the Falkland Islands, by the way, is two, for the most part, tiny little islands that once belonged to Argentina, off the coast of Argentina. They're British today. And the captain of Port Stanley, the capital of the Falkland Islands, went looking for the ship, and he found it, and he found the statue of Kamehameha, and he erected it in Port Stanley. He put it on a street there.
Wow.
Well, it was partially broken. One of the arms was broken, the spear was broken, but the captain of the original ship was passing through a second time, saw the statue, and bought it for like $800.
Wow.
And so he put it back on another ship, and it arrived before the duplicate had been cast and arrived in Hawaii. But because it needed repair, they weren't able to set it up in front of a Li'eolani Hale on King Street. So they put the duplicate up there when it arrived. He also sent a new spear and a new arm, and so they fixed it, and today that original statue is in Kohala on the Big Island.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. There were two.
There were two, and so the original's in Kohala, the duplicate is on King Street. They actually made a third because when Hawaii became a state, they allowed us to put two statues in the Capitol Rotunda. We put Father Damien, and we made a third statue of Kamehameha the Great.
I've seen that, yep. Well, those are, and there's such contrast to the other statues that are in the Capitol, those two statues. You know, you have all these other Founding Father heroes in the basement, and then you have our King Kamehameha and Father Damien. And
while we're on the subject of Congress, Senator Inouye told me a really cute story. He said he was just sworn in as a new congressman, and that very day he got an invitation to the White House for a dinner for Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier. And it was a white tie dinner, and he says the only person he knew that had a white tie was the maitre d' at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. But he rented one, cost him about $16, and he was going to walk to the White House because it was within walking distance. Somebody said, no, you can't do that. You got to hire a limousine. So he hired a limousine. That cost him $40. And he says as he was going through the gate, he could see the Russian Secret Service and the American Secret Service whispering to each other. Who the hell is that?
That's funny.
He heard them say. And the other guy said, I think it's the King of Siam.
The King of Siam.
So I made this composite photo of him where Yul Brynner's face had been.
That's so funny. He's the King of Hawaii, not King of Siam.
There you go.
That's what he ended up being, right? Well, okay, how did Honolulu get its name?
Honolulu means fair haven. And one of the first captains ever to bring a ship into Honolulu Harbor was a guy named William Smith, and he said, we should call this Fair Haven. His crew, William Brown, his crew wanted to call it Brown's Harbor, but he didn't want his name attached to it, and so he was aboard the HMS Butterworth, and so he said we should call it Fair Haven. Well, Hawaiian for Fair Haven is Honolulu. So that's how Honolulu got its name.
Ooh.
And there's another interesting thing about this, about a Nu'uanu stream caused the capital to be moved from Lahaina to Honolulu. And it caused it by creating Honolulu Harbor. It empties into Honolulu Harbor. The silt from it created Sand Island to some extent, and on the reef there. And the fresh water of Nu'uanu stream also cut a hole in the saltwater reef so that big draft ships could get in. And Kamehameha III saw that his population was mostly around Honolulu, because there were so many ships calling on Honolulu because of its harbor, that he decided to move the capital to Honolulu. So little Nu'uanu Stream caused the capital to be moved from Lahaina to Honolulu.
The power of Nu'uanu, right?